Today, guys, I want to talk to you about why quitters do win. Hey, welcome to Wow Words of Wisdom. This is the podcast where we talk about all things mindset, all things confidence, and taking action, even when it feels scary. I'm Sharon McCaffrey, and if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Your mindset shapes everything. The way you think, the way you show up, the way you go after what you really want, and it all starts in your head. So if you've ever felt stuck, doubted yourself, or wondered if you're really capable of more, you're in the right place. Each week, let's break through those mental blocks, shift your perspective, and start making things happen. So I want to bust that myth. It's that old line that winners never quit and quitters never win. So we're going to very lovingly throw that in the bin today because sometimes the strongest, wisest thing that you can do is quit. But, and this is a really big but, we're not using this as a hall pass so that you can bail on things just because they're hard. So that's very, very different. Today, what I'm going to cover and unpack is when quitting is actually the brave thing to do, when it's a trap actually in disguise, and how, to know the difference between, I suppose, what's what I consider smart quitting or probably cheeky avoidance. I suppose the first thing I want to look at is why does quitting get, I suppose, this bad rep? And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we were actually, raised on a grind culture to work really hard, to push through, to stick it out, don't be weak. And the world really does celebrate endurance, even when it can be self-destructive. I suppose how I look at it, it's a little bit like the broken shopping trolley, the one you're fighting it round every aisle and acting like it's it's okay and it's actually not. So you just need to go and swap the goddamn trolley. When is quitting actually winning? And I would like to think, and as I said, I don't want this to be misconstrued for just giving up on something because it's hard. But you have to ask yourself, are you staying in something out of fear, or maybe you're staying in it because of guilt or ego, and maybe it's draining you more than it's actually developing you, or it's not aligned with who you actually want to become. And I've mentioned a number of times on this podcast about when I got married, and I was staying there because of fear, I was staying there because of guilt, I was staying there because of what I felt other people expected from me. But the right thing to do was to leave because it wasn't aligned with the person that I wanted to become. Now, in saying that, it wasn't a decision that I made lightly, but I also understood it just wasn't right for me. And it's kind of that, where the feeling is that, I don't know, I suppose it's like a food or something that has expired. Just because you ordered it doesn't mean that you have to finish it. So bin it and move on if it's not right. But as I said, earlier on, I really want to emphasize this point, and I'm going to labor on it a bit because I don't want people to misconstrue the whole thought process behind this actual topic. It's not an easy way out or something that I want you to use as an excuse. It's not a free pass to give up. I want to make sure that we get that in straight, because quitting can be powerful, but it doesn't mean that we get used to it as an excuse to avoid hard things, because I do believe there's lots of people out there who use quitting it is a habit. So it is, something gets hard. I ran a podcast here before on the emotional cycle of change, and what a lot of people tend to do is they start something and they're all excited about it in the beginning because it's all new and shiny. Then they start to realize, oh, it's a little bit challenging, but they don't want to push through that challenge. So they give up, and then they get distracted by something else that's new and shiny somewhere else, and they go and look at that, and then they give up on what was hard and then start something new. And what ends up happening is they keep going through this loop that they never actually finish anything. So if you're the type of person who starts something but never finishes it, that's why, because quitting will be a habit and you're just giving up when things are hard. So I don't want anyone to think that this is a free pass to give up. There's a massive difference, I believe, between quitting because something's misaligned versus quitting because it's uncomfortable and you don't feel like it today. So that's very, very different. So this is not about quitting the gym because your glutes hurt or about dropping your business idea the minute that it gets a little bit messy or it's a little bit hard, or maybe you've started a new job and it's, a little bit challenging or whatever in the beginning. That's not what this is about. This is about actually intentional quitting. So not quitting because you're scared, not quitting because you're bored, or you're not seeing the instant results. So it's a little bit like a half clean kitchen. You've done the dishes, but the counters are still sticky. Like, do you walk away and do you call it done? No, you finish the job because that's part of the process. So don't confuse resistance with redirection. One is fear dressed up in a fancy way. The other one is your intuition whispering to you that this isn't it. What is it that's really stopping you from quitting? And come back to my marriage and stuff like that. One of the big things in my head at the time was that, what will people think? Okay. And that's fear. Or there's also like, I've come this far syndrome. So then you don't want to give up. Or there can be a bit of an identity crisis where you're like, but who am I if I stop doing this or if I stop being in this relationship? And it's a little bit like climbing the wrong mountain. Or I talk about like having your ladder up against the wrong wall. If you're halfway up the wrong mountain, you've got the wrong shoes on, you've got no snacks and it's raining, but you're still climbing because you told everyone you would. Like maybe you should stop, turn around and regroup would be the right thing to do. Or if you've got your ladder up against the wrong wall, well, rather than climbing it the whole way to the top, you're better getting off and moving the ladder to the right wall. How do you quit intentionally, not emotionally? And I think so many people nowadays, they make a long-term decision on a temporary emotion. And we make decisions on how we feel in the moment in opposed to what is actually right for us. So the first thing I would say to you is to ask better questions. So ask yourself, am I avoiding discomfort or am I stepping into alignment? So is this aligned with what I want or am I actually just avoiding discomfort? Ask yourself, will quitting make room for growth or will it actually create more chaos? And then what you want to do is you want to check your patterns. So check, and as I said earlier on, like this emotional cycle of change that we go through anytime we make a change, it's that, do you have this pattern of quitting? So do you quit every time things get tough? If you find yourself, as I said earlier, if you find yourself like starting things but never finishing them, well, then that is a pattern. Or is this the one time that that you need to honor, that gut feeling? So check your patterns when it comes to that. And then what you want to do is you want to exit with grace and with ownership, not ghosting your responsibilities, be clear, be kind and be firm if you're moving on. And I suppose it's a little bit like changing boat mid-river. Like if your boat's full of holes, don't keep paddling out of pride. Change the boat. But don't just float around aimlessly either. Get in, pick up the oars and, row like hell in the right direction. So what happens after you quit? Like what comes next? So for me, I think is that, you have to give yourself some breathing space. It's not like you don't want to, if you leave that relationship because you know that it's not right for you, you don't just jump into another one or get yourself on online dating and whatever. You need to take some breathing space and get some mental clarity. The energy that's used to be spent forcing the wrong thing. Now what you want to do is you want to, pour it into the right one. But one of the things I often talk about, and one of the things I've done in these situations is getting to know me. Okay, a little bit of self-love, getting to know me, what it is that I really, really want. Quitting isn't the end, but it is the beginning of your alignment, of aligning with the life that it is that you want. And a few little reframes that you can use to help with this is like, rather than saying I didn't quit, it's like I pivoted with purpose. I didn't fail, I freed myself. And I talk a lot about failing forward, and failing forward is part of this, like quitting something that's not working and pivoting and moving forward. And another good one is like I didn't give up, I grew up. So these are little reframes that you can use to help give yourself some clarity. In order to wrap up this episode, I want you to think about if there's something in your life that's weighing you down, or it's draining you, or it no longer fits. Maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a career, maybe it's where you're living, who you're living with. Maybe it's time to let it go. But if you're tempted to quit just because it's hard, or just because it's uncomfortable, or you're not getting the results that you want, as fast, you do need to pause, and you need to ask yourself, like, is this growth pain, or is it that you're actually misaligned? Is this a challenge to rise to, or is it a sign, to release? I know I always say staying within your comfort zone is where your dreams die. So that's really, really important to be aware, of, are you just feeling uncomfortable because it's hard? I want you to choose one thing that you're wrestling with and ask, am I quitting this for, my inner peace, or is it just because I can't be arsed with it? Okay. If it's peace, then go for it. If it's fear, you need to sit with it, and then act with clarity, not convenience. As I said, don't make a long-term decision based on a moment or an emotional feeling. I would love, if you could share this podcast with anyone that please tag me in something that, that you're going to quit, or something that you're going to do to celebrate your bravery, not your burnout. And that's my words of wisdom for today's episode of Wow. I hope this gives you something to think about, because remember, your mindset shapes your reality. The way you choose to think today will impact what you create tomorrow. If you love this episode, let me know. Share it, tag me, or send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Catch you next time.